Hi. Today I'd like to talk about our ability to be in control of our own happiness. So, I think it's very much linked with our assumptions, definitely our expectations, and even the demands that we can tend to have within ourselves, whether it's dealing with other people or it's situational. So, and this goes, it's legitimate to say, try your best to always have as much gratitude in your life as possible. So, I can see, I can hear, I have good health. These are all very important things. I have a roof over my head. I have food. All of those basic things. It's always very, very, very important to have gratitude. If you have, good friends, good family, all very important things, definitely. But beyond that, in everyday dynamics, it can be very easy to forget about all of that and get lost in expectations, assumptions, demands, that kind of thing. And after a while, you end up being focused way more on the negative than the positive, is basically what this is about. So, whether it's something smaller like traffic, living in Southern California, there's a lot of traffic. And a lot of people have road rage and it's kind of funny in a way because Southern California has a lot of people and there's always traffic, pretty much. And it's kind of silly to always be in a state of anger about it because it just kind of is what it is, right? You pretty much have to, when you're driving out there, plan for the traffic, especially Los Angeles, right? But you still just, and I've had moments too where I'm like, because I'm, in a hurry and I'm trying to get somewhere and it's like, well, I know I should have left earlier and blah, blah, blah. Something like that. Or, I have had family members that just are drowning in, following politics and getting really angry about the way things are. Feeling helpless, and so the anger gets even larger, instead of somehow trying to be proactive about whether it's that certain topic that they're angry about it, in some way trying to do something about it, or just the fact that they're stewing on it all the time. There's got to be some kind of balance to try and help yourself get out of that negativity. And I talk a lot in my book, A Necessary Clearing. I talk a lot about abuse, trauma, trying to find balance after that. And, in our everyday lives, you're going to come across people that are just all up in themselves and they take it out on you, whatever the situation. Whether it's a rude salesperson in a store, they're having a bad day and they're just like, at you, or somebody's just angry in general and you get in the crossfire, or maybe they're really just a miserable person because they're not able to figure their stuff out and it comes at you, like all kinds of things, right? That stuff is always going to happen in certain ways, certain percentages. Whatever it may be, big or small. The only person we have control over is ourselves. That's it. So, happiness then. It's not easy. It takes practice. But happiness comes into play then with, yes, gratitude always. But trying to figure out how to have a little bit of distance for yourself. Always keeping in mind the dynamics of the situation. Again, whether it is truly about the situation or it's another person and you. Why are they behaving the way that they are? Why are you being triggered the way that you are? what can be worked out there to where you are able to have a little bit of distance. And that distance is so important. Just a little bit of detachment. Not caring about them or whatever, not that, but just, it's, in my mind, healthy level of detachment, so that you're not in a place of being triggered and just reacting all the time. Traffic, politics, why isn't this thing going the way that I want it to go? Why I need it to go, why isn't this person doing what I want? All this kind of thing. Well, there's a lot of layers there. First of all, you have to look at why you're demanding them to do what you're wanting them to do, and is it even justified? But that's a whole other story. The other thing, though, is, even if it is, there's going to be a bunch of layers going on with them that come into play, right? So all you can do is focus on you. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean, it has to come within yourself first. That deeper understanding, that little bit of detachment for emotional control, the ability to really take in the situation, because once your emotions are not at height level, you're not just reacting, you have that little bit of distance so that you can think more clearly about what's going on. Why am I being triggered the way that I am, like I said? Why are they behaving or not doing, whatever? How do you deal with it? Especially, again, in extreme situations where you've got verbal and emotional abuse or even physical abuse or something's happening. Especially if you can't have real physical distance from that person. In abusive situations, if you can't get away from them, literally, then that mental work comes into play even more so. I know this is extreme, but I think about, as a good example is, somebody who's been, I'm trying to think of their names. Sorry, that's why I'm kind of stumbling, but I'm thinking of like people in the military that were unfortunately captured, tortured, years of being in these horrible conditions, and somehow always finding the way to have some hope and not letting the situation completely destroy them, and even more importantly, not having just a bunch of hate and loathing and rage and anger pointed at the people that were doing it to them. Like, they were able to truly just take a step back and understand where they're at, why they're, the tunnel vision of they think they're right because of whatever, righteous, maybe because of whatever, and even if it's wrong, and you have no ability to change it, you're just stuck. These people were still able to sit in enough of a place of love and emotional distance to where they were just sitting in hope and keeping themselves as emotionally calm as they could under the circumstances, right? I'm sure they broke down and cried. I'm sure they felt hopeless for a while. The yo-yo that happens when you're in extreme situations, of course, but ultimately, the main state that they were able to keep themselves in was much more level and hopeful. And thankfully, it did eventually change. It may have taken a long time, but it did change. That's just one example. Anyone who has been through a bunch of abuse but can still have love for those people or that person, whatever the situation was, whether it's an abusive parent or whatever, and you get to a place where you have deep understanding of why they were stuck in that toxic behavior, what led to them being twisted in that way and making excuses for themselves and, all that kind of stuff. What happens there? And you can't get to that place without finally, working through those layers within yourself first, because you are all that you can control, truly. Working through those layers and really thinking deeply about not only how do I release this anger, how do I release the injustice of it, the pain, the sadness, the betrayal, the disappointment, how do you release that and then simultaneously have understanding of them? It takes a long time. I mean, it's layers of working through those things. But this is all very necessary. And it's all a part of finding that balance again, that happiness. All of us go through so much in our lives. Everybody's got something going on. Everybody has stuff that they're dealing with, working through, trying to heal, trying to release, all different kinds of situations, right? So the most important thing for happiness, truly, is to start with going within. It really is. Yes, gratitude, absolutely, always. But going within and, a little bit each day, and just really looking at where you're at daily. How angry are you? How negative is your self-talk? And how negative are your thoughts with other people? Are you always criticizing other people in your head, or even verbally? How much compassion and empathy do you have, not just for others, but for yourself? Really chipping away at the pieces of what makes your entire emotionality. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? How much of all of this kind of stuff do you push away? Do you jump into alcohol, food, spending time with other people because you don't want to spend time alone, because you don't want to think deeply about things and feel deeply? Are you one of these massive overworkers because you don't want to deal with being alone? All of these types of things are extremely important to think about. But our assumptions, our expectations, and our demands are huge. But it's all wrapped up in what is happening within you. You're not going to be able to control anybody. And the more you try, the more it's going to backfire on you. Just as much as the more you try to not feel something, the harder it's going to hit you. The more you're going to drown in it and stew in it until, the avoidance doesn't work for very long. And even if you are able to shove it down somewhere, it comes out in other ways, whether it comes out in physical illness or something else. It always shows itself until it's actually dealt with. And, the more internal work you can do on yourself to find that balance, to figure out truly how to be happy. A lot of people don't know how to be happy. And, I went a lot of my life not understanding how to be happy. I mean, this is all work that I have been doing on myself as well. I'm not just saying this blindly or what's the right word I'm looking for? I'm not just yapping, without any kind of reality behind it or practice behind it. These are things that I've come to understand because of my own situations, and also just really taking the time to look at the other people that I was dealing with in their situations, and just feeling deeply, really taking that time to do that. And there's always going to be stuff to go through. I mean, this is like a lifelong process, right? Life happens and we have to keep going and adjust, and it's not always easy. And I'm continuing to work in this way, but I have definitely come a long way. And that is why I felt very strongly to write the book that I wrote. It is a self-healing, coming back to balance, like I said, after trauma type of book. And then just every day as well, not always talking about the heaviness, but also the lighter aspects. But how do you find happiness? How do you find balance? In a world that isn't always balanced, right? I mean, it has to start with you before you end up seeing it outside. Really taking control of yourself, and that is basically coming into your own power, balancing the masculine and feminine within yourself, which we all have, right? Again, what are your tendencies and why? What are your triggers and why? What are your talents and strengths too? It doesn't have to all be about the negative. You know, what are your talents and strengths, and what is really gonna have you feeling that passion and that fulfillment in your life? And how do you create it? How do you manifest it, right? There's a lot there. I mean, I could talk about this subject for hours and really get into the layers, but I think for this particular video, I just kind of wanted to say it in an overall general sense. You know, ask yourself those difficult questions. Spend that time with yourself. Whether it's meditation or it's really just a quiet time. Kind of the same thing, but you know, it depends on you. It's all up to you, and there is no right and wrong way. Just taking that time, finding the time. I know there are some people that have really busy schedules, but it's important to make that time for yourself every day. Maybe it's you just go to bed a little bit early so you have that time before you go to bed to really just sit and be and think very deeply. Let yourself feel, even if you're afraid of it. And working through those layers within yourself. And then as far as other people go, I mean, again, you can't control what they do, but you can control your reactions to what they do. So I don't know, it gets really hard when you're dealing with somebody and you're trying to find a common ground so that there can actually be real communication with them, but they're not able to do that. And that's one of the most painful situations in general, because, you know, especially if you have a close relationship with them. Like I've talked about this in more depth in other videos, but it's very hard to then just go, okay, I need to step away. Sometimes just that alone can be very, very hard. But if all they're going to do is attack, then that's all you can do is step away. But if you literally can't step away, like I mentioned before, then that stepping away has to be within yourself. Even if you don't have the actual distance and you're still unfortunately having to deal with that horrible situation, and it's, you know, you just can't get away from them, you know, like a child parent type of thing, or an abusive boss or something, and you haven't figured out, you're not able to just quit, you know, you're trying to find that way to leave. In the meantime, it really becomes about you. How do you find that distance? No matter how nasty they are, or game playing, or anything else, just you protect you internally. Don't let them tear you down. Don't let them dump their crap on you. Nothing. You find, and it does take practice, but you find that place within yourself that just, I know I don't deserve this, and I can't leave just yet, but I will. And in the meantime, I'm going to protect me, you know. And the next step is just don't react and match their nastiness either, because that just drags everybody down, right? It's, I don't know, there's a lot of layers in that kind of stuff. I mean, it's very situational. It depends on the person, it depends on the dynamic, it depends on the situation. But I'm just speaking in a general overview sense, right? But happiness is truly something we create ourselves. And you do need to be very careful about your assumptions, especially your expectations, Whether it's, oh, I'm going to get there with no problem, no traffic whatsoever, and then you get mad when there's traffic, but there's traffic every day. Why are you surprised? Why are you angry? Or even somebody like a family member who is they're just unhappy, and they just spread that unhappiness everywhere, and it doesn't seem to matter whether you talk to them in a loving way to bring it up and try to go, maybe this would be better if, or you're trying to cheer them up, and it never works, and they just are the way that they are, and then you start to dread being around them. There's a lot of ways to deal with different situations, but the most important thing is that you have, again, that little bit of space within yourself, so that it's not becoming an emotional trigger all the time with everything. This isn't going the way that I want. This person isn't behaving the way that I want. This, whatever it may be. And all you can do is just focus in, try and keep yourself in again, not easy, but necessary. And then also be proactive where you can. Some of the most depressing places that a person can get into, you have all these things, and you just feel like you're kind of drowning in that depression. And I understand, I've been there before, but what can make that worse is if you're not proactive about at least one aspect of it. I mean, your entire life could be falling around you. And yes, feel your feelings. Yes, you can't really run away from that, but even if it's just one thing a day, you're down, you feel hopeless, you're drowning in fear, or drowning in sadness, or betrayal, or whatever it is, do at least just one thing that feels like you're moving forward. And make sure that you do that one thing. And then maybe the next day you'll feel a little bit better, and you can do two things. And it could be big or small. I mean, it's truly up to that person and their situation. Just as long as there's something that's moving forward, or being improved in some way, it can be helpful. And then you continue to move from there. The subject of happiness can be talked about forever. It's so detailed, because happiness is truly a state of mind in a lot of ways. But it's not so easy to say that. I mean, you really have to go within and figure out what that happiness is for you. What does that mean? What does it look like? How do I create happiness no matter what is going on? No matter who I'm dealing with, no matter how nasty, no matter, oh, I just lost a bunch of money, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose my home, or maybe I have lost my home, or some, so much happens to us. There's so many things going on. How do you hold on to some balance and some happiness even in those situations? It is very hard, but it's not impossible. It just takes practice. And I'm learning this too as I go along, and I've come through a lot, and I feel like I am in a much better place of balance than I ever was. But yes, I mean, I'm human. Things can happen, and I can get thrown off, I can get triggered and feel hopeless and all these things, but those moments are lessening drastically, thankfully. And I am learning to adjust much more quickly. And knowing that really it comes down to self-love. That's really at the base of all of it is, are you loving yourself enough to do that kind of work? Going through the layers, even the stuff that's painful and difficult, and, but that is a loving choice that you give yourself when you do that. And then by extension, loving to others as well, right? Because when you're in balance, it sounded like I said imbalance. When you're in balance, then in a lot of ways, it helps other people start to come into balance as well. Or at least they'll start to see where they're off. They may not be able to do something active about it yet, but at least they're seeing it. And that's the first step. That's the most important thing. You know, it becomes like a chain reaction. It's very, very important. And it starts with each of us. So always, always at the base of any videos I do or the book or anything, it's truly always going to come down to self-love, because love is power. Like I've said many times, love is the only real power. And that is underneath all of this. You know, that is how you find balance, whether it's just within yourself or it's with another person. You know, working for that balance, that love, that communication, that understanding, that compassion, that empathy, you know, all of it, equality, respect. Even if they're not able to do that for you, toward you, you have a choice of who and what you are and how you're going to react. And that kind of stuff does help you to stay balanced and happier and in a more loving state, right? So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I just felt like I haven't been doing videos that long. I'm just starting with all of this, and the first two were a little bit long. They were a little bit over an hour. So I wanted to make a point of doing a more general video that is much shorter. And I'll kind of jump around with it, with different subjects, different lengths, whatever, as I continue on. But anyway, all right. I love you all very much, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.